The Hundredth Monkey is a philosophy based upon the writing of a man named Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake lives in England, and he has written a book, which I have been studying, called A New Science of Life. And it was voted by the American Academy of Physics as the book most likely to be burned by their academy. All right? Because it is so blasphemous and absurd and silly, the notions inside of it. What Rupert Sheldrake is suggesting is that memory, which is what we can recall of all the things that have happened to us, is simply not stored in the brain. It's just not stored in the brain. All kinds of physical evidence to, like where they do experiments with cutting out pieces of the brain, a lot of ways of scientific evidence of establishing this belief. Just let it in. Don't endorse it, just let it in. Don't bite off my finger. Just look to where it's pointing for a few minutes, okay? The notion is that if memory, of course, is not stored in our brain, then where is it? Right? The philosophy is very simple, that all members of a species are connected together through what they call morphogenetic fields, just very much like magnets. And these fields surround all human beings. The 100th monkey is the number. The 100th monkey. Off the coast of Japan, there's an island. And they took a group of these monkeys from one species, and they put sweet potatoes out there on the beach. And they watched the monkeys. And the monkeys began to wash the sweet potatoes in a certain way that was peculiar to this species. And they began to eat them in a way that was peculiar to this species. After a given amount of time, when a certain number of monkeys within that species began to do that, the same behavior began to crop up in monkeys of the same species on islands 200 and 300 miles away. The question is, how did it happen? How could that have happened? And that's, without going into all the details of that, if there is truth that all members of a species are connected, that all human beings are connected as well. And if all of us are connected in some way that we don't understand, but in fact are connected, then I'm not here to tell you that you have to be thinking positive thoughts because it'll improve your life. I'm here to tell you that you have an obligation because you could be depressing somebody in Uruguay right now by thinking negative thoughts. It's true. Now just think about it. Just let it in. The highest form of ignorance is to reject something you know nothing about. That's the highest form you can get to. We know so little about this whole idea. But what we do know is that when human beings begin to think in positive, healthy ways, that they reduce certain endorphins into the chemistry of your blood. This is from Anatomy of an Illness, Norman Cousins. And that when you think positive, happy, loving, laughing thoughts, there's a different chemistry that goes into your body than when you think depressing, negative, anguishing, despairing thoughts. And that thinking, the way that you decide to think, has a dramatic effect on your chemistry and on your physiology and on your health as a human being. And that we know that when they did the artificial heart transplants, when they were looking for all the people up in Kentucky, who they were going to pick, there were many, many volunteers because a lot of these people only have a few weeks left to live. So if they could get a few more months, they were very willing to be expended. The number one criteria was the will to live. What kind of an attitude does this human being have? How do they think? Because we do not want somebody who gives up on life, who is going to feel bad, who is going to be telling himself that he shouldn't be in this position. So as you begin to think about the possibility, here's what Ken Keyes did in The 100th Monkey. He said, and The 100th Monkey is about nothing I've said so far. That's just all what I learned through my own research and my own reading and so on. The 100th Monkey is a book about nuclear war. The belief is this. If enough people on our planet think there's going to be a nuclear holocaust and believe that it's going to happen, we are going to create it by the way that we think. When a critical mass, and that's the theory, the 100th monkey, when you get to a certain number of people thinking anything, then it begins to spread to the rest of us all over our planet, and we begin to act upon those collective thoughts. The thinking is, who knows, I'm open to it, that we are not only connected to everybody who's alive, but everybody who ever has been, and everybody who ever will be. That we may all in some way be connected. So that if we want, the number one thing in the Hunger Project is that we are trying to raise the consciousness of the world, to help people to understand that starvation is something we cannot tolerate any longer. We won't have it. We won't think of it as something that is inevitable. What is happening now is people are beginning to say, what can I do? How can I change that? The same thing is true with nuclear war. If you want to think about raising your children, my friends, what more important parental task do you have than to make sure that our world is a place that's going to be inhabitable for our children and our grandchildren? As Victor Hugo said, there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And we can make any idea have its time come by collectively thinking in these ways. And imagine that we're all connected like this. Imagine.
Quote from A Course in Miracles. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. For a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is a part of you. For you must be as God created you. Let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God, still shining in your quiet mind. It's about remembering our origination. I committed this passage to memory many years ago, and I use it as a way to remember who I truly am and where I really came from, particularly when I communicate with my Creator, to stay on purpose and in spirit. Now I'd like to go through each of the messages in this observation from A Course in Miracles one by one. Number 1, the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. We came from a quiet, peaceful place. That's the very essence of creation. So when our mind is filled with noisy dialogue, we shut out the possibility of remembering our spirit. Incessant chatter keeps us attached to the physical world and produces anxiety, stress, fear, worry, and so many of the emotional reactions that are decidedly removed from God realization. We must minimize distractions when we wish to communicate with God. So being in nature, away from the artificial noises that invade our space, is helpful. But the most important thing to consider is how to keep our mind free from the dizzying, bewildering cascade of thoughts flowing through our head from morning till night, and even on into our dream state. It's been estimated that we have something like 60,000 separate thoughts every day. The real problem is that we have the same 60,000 thoughts today that we had yesterday. I've made the practice of meditation a part of my daily life because it's one way to quiet the mind so that the memory of God is accessible. So by learning to meditate, or at the very least shutting down the inner dialogue produced, directed, and acted upon by your ego, you can open up a space for remembering and returning to spirit. 2, it cannot come where there is conflict. In order for conflict to exist, there must be two opposing forces at work. That is, one force, in the form of an idea, a point of view, a desire, or a contribution, directly clashes with another. Conflict defines our lives in many ways, as we oppose our partners, our children, our bosses, our neighbors, and even our countries. In politics, it's always one party versus the other. And the entertainment industry portrays battling points of view that are usually turned into violent scenes. Essentially, conflict requires two-ness. However, remembering where we came from involves our returning to the oneness of being in spirit. After all, there are no battling powers in the divine realm of spirit. There's only perfect oneness. And this is what we want to rejoin. We want to become one again with our Creator. And we can't retrieve this memory of God with a mind in conflict in any way. 3, for a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. The second part of this teaching from A Course in Miracles reinforces that a combative mind cannot remember where it once resided in eternal gentleness. Obviously, you can't wage war and simultaneously focus on peace and gentleness, and it is eternal gentleness that you want to remember and rejoin. It's really quite simple to do this. Just close down the battlefield and surrender. Remove all of the artillery, send the soldiers home, and replace the instruments of war in your mind with thoughts of peace, tranquility, and surrender. Making your mind a place of peace is achieved by your own will, so steadfastly refusing to have thoughts of conflict allows you to activate the glory of remembering your spirit. 4. The fourth part of this quote. What you remember is a part of you. Every memory I have is me. What a glorious feeling it is to know this. We each have the power to retrieve any piece of ourselves that we desire and to experience it right here, right now, in this present moment. The great Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard once observed that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. In other words, if we can't go back and remember the spiritual bliss that defined us before the beginning, we've really abandoned a part of ourselves. As we move into communion with God, we must know that our inability to remember our spiritual origins is another way of really saying, quote, I'm unable to know myself because I have no recollection or memory of my spirit, unquote. In fact, the corollary of this line from A Course in Miracles that we're processing right now would be, what you don't remember is not a part of you. In other words, if we fail to remember spirit, then obviously it isn't a part of us. And 5, for you must be as God created you. As you communicate with your source of being, know that you're awakening a part of yourself that's just like God. In fact, you ought to try to approach communication with God by being as closely aligned to the way that you were created as possible. That is, by becoming a vibrational match to the all-loving Creator. Come to the quiet moments in consultation with God in love, in peace, and without judgment. As A Course in Miracles is saying, you must be as you were created. So why put on a false mask and pretend to be anything or anyone else? In this way, you can open the channel of communication because you finally remembered to be the way you were created. And that's the key to effective prayer. And as Gandhi once said, prayer is not an old woman's idle amusement. Properly understood and applied, it's the most potent instrument of action. And 6, let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God still shining in your quiet mind. Let's take the 3 suggestions in this teaching one at a time. First, A Course says, let this madness be undone. The madness here is that of living in a state of conflict. In other words, we must make an attempt to transcend the dichotomies of our life because the division creates so much suffering and keeps us from living an inspired life. I remember a Ram Dass lecture in which he said, I firmly come to the conclusion that there are no thems for me anymore. I can't be told who to hate, who to fight, who to subdue. I only see an us in my heart. All those messages to divvy up our world are insane. All our self-centeredness just drives our ego's insatiable appetite for making us special and putting other people down. The Course encourages us to be done with this madness once and for all, both in our minds and in our actions. And second, we're told to turn in peace to the remembrance of God. Once again, we know in our heart that we came from a place of peace. So any discord can't be the result of our Creator's actions. God cannot come to us when we pray from non-peace, so the solution is to return to the remembrance of Him and ask to be made an instrument of His peace. When I find myself out of sorts, I remember. And what I remember is to turn to peace right now in prayer. I become peace rather than anguish, and I feel the calmness I long for come over me like a wave of pleasurable relief. The most important thing that you will gain from cultivating unconditional love will be freedom from hate and violence. When these thoughts are removed, you discover the presence of joy and peace. This is an automatic reaction to unconditional love because you are in harmony with the creative source. The ego identifies you primarily as a physical body, separate from God, and in need of constant stroking to massage your self-importance. When you simply say this is an illusion and it doesn't really exist, those ideas are replaced with unconditional love. And the joy you experience is really the denial of the false and an affirmation of the truth of your being. You are absolutely free when you are not consumed with your self-importance. You are free when you no longer need to be stroked, coddled, and approved of by everyone you meet. There is a great sense of joy in feeling free. Think of times when you have felt the freest in your life, when the pressures to perform are off, when you are walking in nature, when you are in solitude and communing with God. Joy, freedom, and unconditional love are inseparable. They flow from the experience of each other. To be joyful is to hold on to nothing and to have no restrictions. This is also the feeling of freedom, and it is a result of embracing the unconditional love of the divine energy that is the center of your being. This is not to say that one ought not to enjoy a massage, a delicious meal, lovemaking, and all of the pleasures of the body, but it is the mind that is processing and allowing you to experience the pleasure. It is the mind that makes it real. Your purpose is to align your mind with the unconditional love that is the divine source of all material things, including your body. With that alignment comes joy and power. When one drop of water separates from the ocean, it becomes a speck that is essentially powerless and weak. But when it aligns with its source, the ocean itself, it is powerful beyond what is possible as an individual drop of ocean. And so it is with you. It's a difficult thing for our egos to contemplate this concept of oneness. Unconditional love and becoming a co-creator in your life is possible when you know that God is not separate from you. You and God are one and the same. In the New Testament, Jesus says to the multitudes, "I have said, ye are gods." And later, "When a man believes in me, he does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. When he looks at me, he sees the one who sent me." One of the great meditation exercises that I learned many years ago involves imagining lifting yourself out of your body and floating into space so far that you are actually observing the entire planet. If you do this, try to imagine what the Earth is like without you on it. It is a very difficult task for your ego to even contemplate the world without you on it. Next, begin to observe the planet without any judgment, refusing to label anything good or bad, right or wrong. Simply instruct yourself to notice, allow, and send unconditional love. The process of being a detached observer occurs in the silence of your contemplations or meditations. Begin by seeking out time to be quiet and enter this inner place of love. It is in that silence that you will come to truly know the divine energy of unconditional love. Remember to keep uppermost in mind that love transforms. Unconditional love heals the body and the mind. And then also remember that the polarity of love is fear. Fear is a current of energy that literally runs through your body and is produced when you feel cut off from the source of unconditional love. Every time you experience fear, ask yourself, what's going on that I have substituted fear for love in this moment? Also, begin to acquire a private, non-publicized, and regular habit of meditating. With every breath you take, feel yourself taking in unconditional love. With every exhalation, expel thoughts of fear. Then pick one day to practice this exercise with a partner of your choice. Make a decision to think, act, and radiate nothing but unconditional love for the entire 24-hour period, including your dreams. If this works for you for one day, see if you can extend it for another day or two. Also, try making a decision to turn over your most difficult challenges in the area of unconditional love to God. Simply turn them over with a request such as, I have been unable to bring love into my life in these areas, and I am asking for your divine guidance in accomplishing this. Also, in your silent moments of prayer, do not be afraid to ask for help. And then know the connection between manifesting your heart's desire and unconditional love. Without your connection to this love, you lose your connection to the creative process. Unconditional love is in all things you wish to attract as well as in you. Keep it honestly, and you keep your ability to know that you are a God. Lose it, and you lose your godliness. It is that simple. It is with unconditional love that you find your true connection to the divine energy that is in all things. Being peace. Peace isn't something that you ultimately receive when you slow down the pace of your life. Peace is what you're capable of being and bringing to every encounter and event in the waking moments of your life. Most of us are waging a non-stop internal mental skirmish with everyone we encounter. Being peaceful is an inner attitude that you can enjoy when you've learned to silence your incessant inner dialogue. Being peaceful isn't dependent on what your surroundings look like. It seldom has anything to do with what the people around you think, say, or do. A noiseless environment isn't a requirement. St. Francis's famous prayer states it better than I can. Make me an instrument of thy peace. In other words, St. Francis wasn't asking God to provide him with peace. He was asking for guidance to be more like the peace he trusted was his source. Being peace is different from looking for peace. This principle isn't about merely choosing tranquil thoughts when you're feeling frayed and anxious. I suggest picturing a container deep within yourself out of which all of your thoughts flow. Inside of this container, at its very center, imagine a candle flame. You need to make a commitment that this flame in the center of the container, holding all of your thoughts, will never, ever even flicker, though the very worst may go before you. This is your container of peace, and only peaceful thoughts can fuel this burning candle. You don't need to change your thoughts as much as you need to learn to be an energy of peace lighting the way and attracting serene, harmonious thoughts and beings. In this way, you'll become a being of peace. Obviously, you take this inner receptacle with you wherever you go. When people attempt to put some kind of pressure on you, when you feel overwhelmed, or when situations arise that previously incited your distress or bellicosity, you can immediately turn to your inner candle flame of peace and see how to keep your light glowing. This is being the peace that you wish for yourself. This is offering a matching vibration to your desire to be a tranquil and amicable being rather than a person suffering from the disease of trying to make life go faster. You've already seen the results of that folly, and you notice the symptoms of stress in virtually everyone you meet. As a being of peace, you make a huge impact on those around you. It's almost impossible to be totally stressed out in the presence of someone who has opted to be peace. Peace is a higher and faster energy. When you're being peace, just your presence alone will often nullify the uneasiness and the tension in those around you. In fact, this state causes pheromones of measurable energy to emanate from you. They affect others who become more peaceful without even being aware of the transformation taking place. The secret of this principle for restoring balance to your life is be the peace and harmony you desire. You cannot get it from anything or anyone else. So you're not ready to take Nisargadatta's profound advice and just be? Then work at becoming that being with the inner light of a steady candle flame. Whenever you think something, you must go to this container, select a thought, and send it out into the world. Using this metaphor, the real issue isn't about simply selecting positive, loving thoughts and having your world shift back into balance. The real issue is what's in the container. That is, what's in the heart reservoir you have inside of you to give to others. This container within is connected to an endless supply of love. You need only turn your thoughts to that source to be filled with love. Love for yourself, love for the world, love for life, love for all others, and most significantly, love for your source of being. Then this is all that you'll have available to give away, and consequently, all that returns to you. It's been said that the difference between all of us living at ordinary levels of human consciousness and those we call saints is that they never forget God even for a single moment. They're cheerful when life is difficult, patient when others are impatient, and loving when others respond with hatred. Why? Because of that container. Ordinary people have a container out of which they pluck loving thoughts in certain circumstances. The saint has an internal vessel that contains nothing else out of which and into which love flows freely. So rather than working on simply changing your thoughts in order to become more peaceful and loving, why not shoot for the moon and think like the saint that you are? Focus on that container within. When you continually say, Holy Spirit, guide me now, you'll see your container overflowing with so many loving thoughts that it's impossible for negativity in any form to alter the balance within. We seem to live in a totally out-of-balance world where our desires for feeling peaceful are challenged by the myriad non-peaceful energies that are considered newsworthy. But we do have a choice in this matter. And we can choose to realign ourselves energetically with our desire to live in this world peacefully, regardless of what's going on around us, and in spite of the non-peaceful energy we're so often subjected to. Sogyal Rinpoche observed that, quote, 2 people have been living in you all of your life. One is the ego, garrulous, demanding, hysterical, calculating. The other is the hidden spiritual being whose still voice of wisdom you have only rarely heard or attended to, unquote. I'm inviting you to restore some balance by looking for heaven everywhere and listening and attending to that hidden spiritual being that is within you at all times, begging you to pay it more heed. Just as you become what you think about all day long, so too do your relationships become what you think about. Your life and all of the relationships within it are all purposeful. Generally speaking, the quality of our lives is pretty much related to the quality of our relationship to the people in our lives. And, to add a piece to the equation, our relationships reflect how we relate to ourselves. That's right, to ourselves. When you cultivate the awareness of your body, mind, and soul as one, and experience unity within yourself, You are then ready to share this sense of wholeness and holiness with others, and this is where your relationships come in. When you have love for yourself, that is what you have to give away. What is inside you gets there by way of your thoughts. If you harbor hate, hate is what you give away. If you harbor self-contempt, contempt is what you give away. If you harbor love and compassion is what you give away. Your relationships travel the same course you do. If you learn through suffering and questioning why things were not working out, as I discussed earlier, then your relationships also suffered. If you followed the path of outcomes and began to see that there were lessons to learn in life, then your relationships also reflected this pattern. And if you've gone to purpose and have your life on purpose, your relationships will also reflect this position in your life. Remember, purpose is about giving. Let's take a look at the core ingredient of a relationship that is on purpose, and then examine some specific methods for getting there. At the center of a purposeful relationship is love, but it is more than simply being able to say the words, "I love you," for the words are used by people who also berate and harm each other on a daily basis. Love is giving, and it has nothing to do with what you receive. This ingredient of love at the level of giving is how purpose is defined, and it is the ultimate in creating miraculous relationships. If you have love inside of you, that is all that you will have available to give away. You begin to see the fullness of God in everyone you encounter, and the level of your relationships to others takes on the glow of real magic. You see your children and all children not in terms of what they are doing or how they're behaving or misbehaving, but beyond to the invisible part of them, the soul that is in that young body. You meet that soul with love and radiate it outward to them, and they will in turn respond with love. You have loving relationships with others because you bring love, rather than because you seek it from others. Members of your family with whom you have had a difficult time relating are no longer the source of your disdain. Your anger and negativity is gone, replaced by non-judgmental love. This does not require long years of therapy or the assistance of support groups or drugs or special herbs. It requires only that you shift to being a spiritual being first and a physical being second. Your friendships and business relationships can also improve dramatically with this new giving approach. When a conflict arises, you suspend your negative thoughts and instead send out love. When you respond in an unthreatened manner and instead communicate an inner knowing in a peaceful, loving way, you are incapable of being rattled by challenges. You have created a miracle in that relationship. I can remember as a college professor having some gigantic disagreements with my colleagues. They were what we call difficult people to get along with unless you shared their point of view, which very few people did. I discovered I was always able to get my way with these impossible colleagues. I was experiencing real magic where others were experiencing exasperation. The secret? Send them love and ask nothing of them. The colleagues always came around and found it impossible to be nasty or confrontational with me. I simply sent them the love I had inside and then surrendered. This approach to relationships is basically my approach to life. Stay on purpose. Know that you're here to serve. Get off of having to prove yourself. Remove your ego from the encounter and send out love. Giving love with no expectations is the cornerstone of your relationship when you are on purpose. There really is very little else that you need to know. Practice this giving of love without conditions, and you'll find yourself feeling full rather than empty, and blissful rather than miserable. Here are 4 ancillary qualities that go into this real magic in your relationships. 1. Relinquish your need to be right. This is the single greatest cause of difficulties and deterioration in relationships, the need to make the other person wrong or to make yourself right. The spiritual partnership is a relationship of equals. No one needs to be proven wrong. Each person has the right to their own point of view. A simple reminder goes like this: I know how I feel about this, and it doesn't match how she feels. But so what? It is enough that I know it in my mind. I have no need to make her feel wrong. Then stifle yourself, and you have created a miracle right there. You have replaced a potential conflict with a loving response. Practice this, and you will see love replacing anger between you. This is also true in your relationships to all others. Your children need to be guided, not to be made wrong. The embarrassment that goes with being proven stupid leads to a self-image of stupidity. You can replace those statements designed to prove how superior you are with loving responses designed to help your children and others examine their own point of view. This can be applied in business, with strangers that you meet, in disputes with your neighbors, in virtually all human relationships. 2. Allow space.
Let there be space in your togetherness. When you love someone for what they are, rather than what you think they should be, or for how they please you, then allowing for privacy and space comes automatically. The clinging relationships racked with jealousy and fear come from individuals who believe they have a right to dictate what the other person ought to be. Rather than regarding the need of your partner to have alone time as a threat, see it as a time for renewal that you celebrate. Make every effort to help each other have that space. The irony is, the more space you allow and encourage within the relationship, the more the relationship will flourish. 3. Eliminate the idea of ownership. Seek to enjoy each other, not to possess each other. No one wants to feel owned. No one wants to feel like a possession. No one wants to be dominated or controlled. We all show up here with a purpose, and that purpose gets thwarted when any human being attempts to interfere with our heroic mission. Ownership is the greatest inhibitor to feeling a sense of purpose and mission in one's life. You don't have the right to tell the people with whom you are in a relationship what they ought to be doing while they're here on earth. That is only between each person and their soul. You may succeed in imprisoning another, and you may have a marriage that lasts for 60 years, but you do not have a loving relationship if either partner feels owned or like a possession. This is the lesson I had to learn the hard way. It cost me dearly. A painful divorce and many unpleasant hours in hostile conflict. Today, I can't even conceive of the idea that I could own my wife. She is her own person, and my own relationship to her is based upon acknowledging that in her. It is indeed reciprocal. It came about through giving, not demanding, through respect, not criticism. Number 4, you do not have to understand. What a great lesson this is in learning how to make all relationships work at a magical level. You simply do not have to understand why someone else would want to do and think the way they do. The fact that you are willing to say, I do not understand, and that is fine, is the greatest understanding you could exhibit. You are together not to understand each other, but to aid each other in living a life at purpose. These are the qualities that make for a purposeful relationship. They all orbit around the planet of unconditional love. Get to this place, and you will begin to see results in all of your relationships.